For section 9.2, we're going to be looking at our final method of solving quadratics, which is quadratic formula. So when using quadratic formula, the cool thing about using quadratic formula is it works anytime, anywhere. So if you remember, when we solve by factoring, it has to be factorable. When we solve by square root property, you don't want that middle term. When we solve by completing the square, you don't want any a greater than or less than 1. Quadratic formula, there are no stipulations. You can use it anytime, anywhere. It works every time. It's not easier or harder in certain situations, which is why students like it. It's also fairly easy. You're going to set the equation equal to 0, identify your a, b, c, and plug it in. So let's talk about what the quadratic formula is. Well, if you remember from Algebra 2, it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Now, there's a really important part to this equation. So this super important part of this equation is right here. It's the b squared minus 4ac. This number, the number that you get when you do b squared minus 4ac is called the discriminant. And what the discriminant does is it tells you exactly how many and what kind of solutions you're going to get. So basically the discriminant is a number. When you plug in your b and your 4 and your a and your c and you plug it all in and get in your calculator, you're going to get a number. If that number is greater than 0, you're actually going to get 2 real solutions. You're going to get 2 nice, clean, real solutions. If that particular number happens to be equal to 0, so if when you plug in b and a and c, you happen to get a number that's equal to 0, you're actually only going to get 1 real solution. And if that number is negative, in other words, if you get a number that's less than 0, you're actually going to get 2 imaginary solutions. In other words, your answer is going to have an I in it. So that number, b squared minus 4ac, tells us what our answer is going to look like. It's called the discriminant. I'm going to show you how to use it in just a second. All right, so let's take a look at our first example. For our first example, I have 4x squared minus 11x is equal to 3. So for step 1, the first thing we want to do is set it equal to 0. So I'm going to take that positive 3 and I'm going to minus it over. Our second step is to actually identify what a, b, and c are. So a is the number attached to x squared, b is the number attached to x, and c is the number by itself, including the signs in front of it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to plug it into our formula. So I'm going to write my formula up here so you guys can see it while we work out this problem. Keeping in mind that b squared minus 4ac is going to be my discriminant, okay? So let's take a look at this. My b, for this negative b right here, does not mean that every number I plug in right here has to be negative. What this negative b means is change the sign of whatever b you're given. In other words, this is negative 11, this is negative b. That's negative 11, that's positive 11. You change the sign. This is negative 11. My b that I'm going to use is going to be a positive 11. Plus or minus the square root of. b squared is 11 squared. 11 squared is 121, so I am literally going to write 121 straight in there. Minus 4 times a, my a is 4, my c is a negative 3. All divided by 2 times a, or 2 times 4. Now the easiest way to do this without making a mistake is to actually simplify everything under the root first. In other words, find your discriminant first. Not only is that going to simplify this in one clean step, but what it's going to do is it's going to tell us what our solutions are going to look like. So if I literally get into my calculator and take 121 minus parentheses 4 times negative 3, what you should end up getting is 169. Now what that does is that tells me a couple things. First of all, 169 is greater than 0. And if you remember from our last slide, since 169 happens to be greater than 0, what that means is we're going to get 2 real solutions. In other words, we're going to get 2 answers and we're not going to get an I. Now I'm going to continue simplifying that. So now that I know what my solution is going to look like, I'm going to continue cleaning this up. You got to continue cleaning up that root first. Well, the square root of 169 happens to be 13, a nice clean 13. So I've got 11 plus or minus 13 divided by 8. Now since there's no square root left, I can actually combine all of these things. In other words, what I have is I actually have 11 plus 13 divided by 8, and I also have 11 minus 13 divided by 8. That's what that plus minus means, giving me a positive 3 and a negative 1/4. And both of those are my solutions. X equals 3 and x equals a negative 1/4. Both of those also are two real solutions, which is what we knew we were going to have from our discriminant down here. All right, let's go ahead and look at a different problem. So this time we're going to look at x squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 10x. So rule of thumb is put your like terms together first. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to minus that 10x over, and I'm actually going to put it with its like term, which was that 6x, making it, a negative 4x. Now I'm going to go plug it into my quadratic formula. Once again, I'm going to write my quadratic formula up here so you guys can see it. Keeping in mind, yet again, let me get my blue pen here, that this is our discriminant. It's going to tell us a lot of things. Now I'm ready to plug it in. Remember, this b does not mean you have to put a negative number here. It means change the sign of whatever b you're given. So here, my a is 1. It's a silent 1. My b is that negative 4. My c is that 5. So negative b would be positive 4. Square root b squared is 16 because it's 4 squared minus 4a c, all divided by 2a, or 2 times 1. Now remember from the last problem I said you want to simplify this first. And you can literally, as long as you put parentheses around this, you can literally plug it straight in your calculator. 16 minus parentheses 4 times 1 times 5. That's our discriminant. So after we do that, what we end up getting is negative 4. If you did it correctly and plugged in your calculator correctly, you got a negative 4. Now that is my discriminant. My discriminant is a negative 4, meaning it is less than 0. And since it is less than 0, I'm going to get two imaginary solutions. In other words, I'm going to get two answers, but I'm going to have an I. So I need to be ready for that. Keep going, keep simplifying your square root first. You can't do anything till that's completely simplified. The square root of negative 4 happens to be 2i. Now at this point, since both of these in the top can be divided by that 2, I can go ahead and divide it by 2. Since all of them are out of the root, since all of them are divisible by 2, I can go ahead and divide it by 2, making my answer 2 plus or minus I. In other words, 2 plus I is one of my answers, and 2 minus I is my second answer.